He waits no more.
What is the truth?
She's not all she seems to be.
We have no information. Have we solved the identity of this mysterious woman? Probably not, but that wouldn't make a good YouTube title, would it? What are the facts? Who is this woman? Well, she's called Mrs. Flood, apparently. Maybe there's some sort of anagram going on here, but we'll get to that. She's the only Doctor Who character to consistently break the fourth wall.
Even the sonic screwdriver won't get me out of this one.
Well, almost.
I'm nothing without an audience.
Kind of.
Doctor was me.
Christmas to all of you at home.
Her appearances in the show make quite a swift departure from the typical storytelling conventions that we're used to within Doctor Who. Now you could argue, oh okay, you're overthinking this, it's probably just a fun little stylistic choice to make Mrs. Flood look down the barrel of the lens. But showrunner Russell T Davies has highlighted in Doctor Who Unleashed that Mrs. Flood is a mysterious character. You will eventually find out more about her. She's a slow burn, Mrs. Flood. Come back and find out. I mean, that's the word from Russell T Davies, so this video is warranted. In episode 1 of the new era, The Church on Ruby Road, she breaks the fourth wall by asking if we've ever seen a TARDIS before. Why is there the focus on TARDIS? Was that just a fun little Easter egg building up to the Sutekh reveal of the finale? Or could it be something more? Then again, in the season 1 finale, she breaks the fourth wall twice.
He waits no more.
I'm sorry, you tiny little woman.
I have such plans.
Such plans, eh? What are these plans? She then proceeded to go one step further and break the fourth wall of the Doctor Who proms, which I was in attendance of. That was great fun.
1986. Yeah, I saw Queen. Sometimes I hear whispers on the breeze. They tell me stories, amazing tales, like this one.
This quote is one that stands out to me. It could just be a complete, joke, improv from Anita Dobson, or it could imply that she actually is, within the narrative, someone that hears all of these stories, maybe a god of stories, something along those lines, someone that's purely watching the Doctor and Ruby for their own entertainment. I mean, the suitcase that she holds at the end of the Empire of Death is covered in badges and bits that say she's been to places such as New Earth and other planets. Is she just like us, an audience watching the Doctor to hear the story? Anyway, and then actress Anita Dobson, not the character Mrs. Flood, actress Anita Dobson showed up at Cardiff Comic Con very recently, where she had this to say on Mrs. Flood.
At the end of the next series, you will know everything about Mrs. Flood. And they never told, well, Russell or nobody told me anything of what her journey would be, so I just went in and played the part, you know. It wasn't until the series you're about to see that about a third of the way in, after I finally got the script, I thought, oh, this is who she is. I can't tell you, of course, but yeah, so finally, yeah, I know where I come from. Yeah. It sank into my head that she's not all she seems to be, which you obviously know now. And that was quite exciting too, so I thought, just learn your lines, turn up and do what you're told. There's a line that she says, and I thought, that's kind of a little bit odd for her to say that at this point. So even at that point, she still has another twist or a turn. So you're not quite sure. You think she's one thing, but you don't know. She always keeps a few things in her pocket, you know? You never quite know where she's going.
She also praises Russell T Davies for being incredibly inventive and for the fact that everything, including the space babies, ties together and is all going to be wound up in a perfect little Mrs. Flood bow present. The analogy ran away with me, but just listen to this.
But he never does anything without a reason. It looks like it's random, Do you remember the first episode was with the babies, the babies on that planet that were running the spaceship? And I remember I watched it and thought, what's this about? Where's this come from? When I started filming what you're going to see soon, I thought, I think I know what this is about. Everything's tied up. Everything's done for a reason. He's very clever. He's thinking ahead all the time, you know.
I feel like she's hinting at an evil thing. Like, I suppose on the surface you could say, oh, Mrs. Flood, she's like the nosy neighbour, she's quite friendly, but I don't know. Is her hinting at Mrs. Flood being evil a double bluff? Is Mrs. Flood actually going to be someone good? Why hasn't she unleashed her plan yet? What's she waiting for? Unless she's not evil, doesn't have an evil plan, and she's waiting to help protect the Doctor. That could kind of flip everything on its head. So with all of that in mind, who is she? Well, here are the best theories. Let me know in the comments which theory you thought was the best, or if I've missed any major theories that you guys have seen, or that you guys came up with. Number 1, Susan. Okay, go with me on this one. Susan is the Doctor's granddaughter, first seen in the first ever episode of Doctor Who, An Unearthly Child. She's technically the first ever companion. And no, we're not counting Carvanista from Flux because, yeah, canonically, in the Doctor's memory, first companion. Oh, but somewhere in Big Finish? No. It was about as subtle as a bull in a china shop, but Susan kept getting mentioned in Doctor Who Season 1. In The Devil's Cord, they literally just stopped to be like, Susan, my granddaughter. And then obviously this builds up to the finale in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, where we're led to believe that Susan Triad, S-Triad TARDIS, is Susan Foreman. But in fact, she's not. She's Sutek, who's using a really convoluted plan. But the point is, all of this is being set up for a Susan return. That's really what it gives the vibe of. Russell T Davies even commented on one of the Doctor Who Instagram posts, ooh, I wonder whatever happened to Susan. Like, was all this focus on Susan literally just for a silly little plot twist with Sutek? Surely not. And you know, I do think there is a chance we'll see Susan in some capacity, because in the Season 1 finale, I was expecting it to happen. When the Doctor goes, when he's saying goodbye to Ruby, he's like, you helped me discuss family in a way that I never did before. Which, in my mind, is like, okay, he's going to go back and see Susan. But maybe, like Russell said in that first little segment, it's a slow burn. Maybe the Doctor over time is going to realise he should go back and see Susan, and in Season 2, he'll go back, or Susan is going to come to him. Maybe she's already here, maybe she's Mrs. Flood. Now, this focus on a TARDIS I mentioned at the start. Ever seen a TARDIS before? Susan claims to be the one that came up with the TARDIS anagram. TARDIS. Susan says she invented those initials. So maybe that's the fun little tie-in. Episode 1 of this new era, Susan, Mrs. Flood, is joking about the TARDIS, or maybe that's probably quite convoluted. But it would make sense if Susan got tired of waiting and she came to the Doctor and was like, look mate, I've done my waiting. Something along those lines. Maybe she's gone a bit corrupt with power as the years have gone on. Maybe she's angry at the Doctor for abandoning her. There's any number of reasons that Mrs. Flood could be Susan. Let me know your best one in the comments. But if it's Susan, why can she break the fourth wall? Because I think that's a pretty notable character trait of Mrs. Flood. Russell T Davies has actually said in interviews that one of the reasons he chose to break the fourth wall in this new era is because Doctor Who's been so close to doing it so many times anyway. Maybe you could argue he's just done it for fun. He does, however, claim that he knows why she can break the fourth wall, and so do certain members of the crew, but he's not going to tell us immediately. He actually said there was one point where he was going to possibly explain it in the Star Beast, because the Meep was going to be breaking the fourth wall left, right and centre. He'd have little asides where he was in Rose's shed, where he'd be all cute and friendly with Rose, then turn round, direct to camera and be like, ooh, I have evil plans, which is quite funny, but I think he's transferred that idea over and kept it purely for Mrs. Flood. In saying that, there are other instances of characters in Season 1 breaking the fourth wall, but very briefly. Maestro winks directly at the camera and so does the Doctor. So what do these three have in common? Could they be gods? I think one of the most likely outcomes here is that Mrs. Flood is some sort of god, or god of all gods. I mean, I know we said Sutekh was the god of all gods before, but maybe he is the god of all gods apart from the other god of all gods, which is Mrs. Flood. We'll come back to this idea, but yeah, I think she's a god. Now, the next possibility is the Rani, and I know. Everybody says the Rani, and I don't even think she's the Rani, but we've got to tick it off this obligatory list. Now, I mentioned an anagram at the start of this video. See, I'm very good at foreshadowing. And what is Mrs. Flood an anagram of? Well, flood. And how'd you get a flood? Rain, Rani. Yep. Yeah, rain. I mean, it's a pretty loose connection, but also, I'm not being funny, if Sutekh, as in Susan Technology, can be an anagram for Sutekh, the god of death, rain and flood, and that whole thing could... maybe that's going somewhere. It's also worth noting that for the first time in years, the Rani keeps getting name dropped. They actually cut a scene from The Giggle where Mel was going to talk about the Rani. Why is the Rani on Russell's mind so much? Why is he writing her in the scripts? Could the red fingernails of the woman that picked up the gold tooth that was the master in The Giggle actually belong to the Rani? And then again in Space Babies, the Doctor drops her name in for no reason. Is Russell sowing the seeds like he did with Vote Saxon or Bad Wolf, showing the name Rani in places because she's going to make a return? And if she is making a return, she's Mrs. Flood. A more bonkers theory out there is that she is a former companion or future companion or just a companion of the Doctor. A lot of people have pointed out that most of Mrs. Flood's wardrobe choices are very similar to former companions. Her white coat is very similar and reminiscent of Romana 1. What she wears in the finale, you could argue, is like Clara, when Clara's in Face the Raven and Hellbent. Her body warmer sort of outfit, you can say it's kind of like Rory Adipose. But you get the idea. I honestly think it's probably just a coincidence. But maybe there's some weight in this. If she's a future companion or past companion, maybe the costume department are hinting at her origins by dressing her as former companions. Maybe she's an embodiment or the god of time travel, and that has something to do with the Doctor's companions. Maybe she's a future companion that's come back in time because she got angry at the Doctor. Future companion turned bad, came back in time to get vengeance along the timelines of doom. Something like that would make sense because it would explain why she is in the know of everything. Like when Sutekh appears, she knows that Sutek's there. She's like, oh, it's Sutekh. She says to Cherry, like, oh, I had such plans. Could she even be, I know I made it very clear Susan was the first companion, but could she be a pre-Susan companion? Carvanista was revealed to be a former companion in Doctor Who Flux, so pre-Timeless Child era, because the Timeless Child keeps getting name dropped, could Mrs. Flood be an OG companion that the Doctor can't even remember? Maybe she was abandoned as well, and you're gonna get this whole theme of the Doctor abandoning people and companions being angry, etc. But finally, the most likely option, I believe, at the moment, is that she is a new character. She's a god of something, maybe the god of stories, but she's a new character. She's not an old one. I think she's going to be an antagonist. I don't think it'll just be straight up evil, though. I think she'll have some sort of contorted plan that she thinks she's doing something good for the universe, and everyone else thinks she's absolutely not. I also think, as I mentioned, the fact that Maestro, who is a god, can break the fourth wall implies, godlike status for Mrs. Flood. Maybe she's something beyond a god. Maybe, in fact, she's a harbinger, and we're being massively misdirected here. Mrs. Flood is someone's harbinger, and whoever this someone is going to be the big bad of season 2. Or maybe when the big bad of season 2 does its big bad thing, Mrs. Flood is going to turn around and be like, actually, I'm a god, but I'm a good god, and they're going to fight each other. Something like that could be quite funky. But, as ever, let me know your theories in the comments down below. Have we possibly solved who Mrs. Flood is? No, but maybe we will in the future. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share. Check me out on Patreon for exclusive updates, news videos, early reviews, yada yada yada. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.